It's not so much that you're good or not. You need to be good. That's the cost of entry, everybody. So if you can't be good, forget about even playing the game. That's just the cost of entry. What you have to think about is, where is there a growing or surging demand for hungry, like there's a hungry appetite for the kind of work that you do. And it's not always where you think it is.
My buddy Chris Do is on the podcast today, and you are in for a killer episode. In case you don't know, Chris is the founder of The Future, a company dedicated to teaching creatives how to build a thriving career. Their YouTube channel has nearly 2.5 million subscribers, and Chris is about as in-demand a public speaker as you will find. He was nice enough to come back on the pod to talk about all of the stuff that's been going on for the last few years, and to offer up some really good practical advice for anyone looking to get more work. He's one of the smartest people I know. I respect the hell out of him, and it's always fun to chat with him. So let's hear from Chris. Chris, let's start, just jump right in. Let's talk about the economy, because I'm sure you get asked this like every day. I get asked this all the time. How bad is it out there? Actually, just yesterday, one of our contributors wrote to me. He's like, dude, how bad's the economy? What are you hearing? And, I have like this interesting vantage point because I'm not like working in it. You talk to a lot more people than me. You have a much bigger audience. So why don't we start there?
Okay.
What's the design economy like right now?
Okay. I think there are two economies right now. There's the one that Wall Street talks about, which is through the roof. We're breaking records again. And then there's the people's economy, which is like, what's it like in the streets? And as far as I can tell, anecdotally, there's blood in the streets. People are desperate for work right now in ways that I've not seen before. Is evidence in the conversations I'm having, and also in the DMs of people trying to sell me something. And it's gone beyond desperation. They'll say like, I haven't had work in 3, 6, 9 months. I don't know what I'm doing. I can't get a job. I can't get a gig. There's no opportunities out there. And there's a couple of things I can think of. Number one is, I think during COVID, employees had the power, the leverage of power shifted to employees. So everybody's like, I'm going to work from home and I'll come in when I want to. And what happened was, it worked for a while because people were super productive. And then they started like, I'll do laundry right now. And productivity started to go down. I talked to agency owners, people who own firms that have 300, 400, 500 employees. They're like, you know what? Our overhead is up, but our productivity, our revenue is way down. And they don't know how to get people to return to the office. So that power had shifted to employees, but then it crippled companies, and people are not being as diligent as they should be, I think. And now what we're feeling is the aftermath of all the pandemic decisions, and it's pretty rough. The power is shifting back to companies now, where they're saying, and Elon Musk put out a tweet, if you don't want to come to work, might as well turn in your letter of resignation. Now, I think that's pretty extreme. Somewhere in the middle has to be the case. And now people are just glad to have a job, and it's like kind of righting itself.
Yeah, that was kind of my instinct too, is that a lot of it's a correction, right?
Yeah.
And that was kind of, I'd love your take on that too, because I think there's probably a couple of layers of things happening, right? Like one is there was this giant inflationary effect of having, everything shut down and then all of this money injected into the system, right?
Yeah.
And on top of that, there was like the NFT thing, so a lot of people made money there. And then when that stopped, now we're back to, maybe we're back to where we were at the beginning of 2020 or the end of 2019, but it's so far from the height that it feels like, oh my God, something crashed, there's a recession. And then on top of that, there's other factors too. So how much do you think this is a macro thing, like a correction, versus this is a new thing caused by maybe AI or something else?
I don't know. We're feeling the effects of AI yet. And I know there are tools that are on the horizon that I could see that blow my mind. Text to video generators that are like photoreal and spot on. It should freak you the F out. It really should. And if you are slow to adapt to what's going on in terms of new tools and technologies, you're only putting yourself at a disadvantage. I think there will always be a need for people who say, I understand the bigger goal, the objective, the story. I understand the art references, and here's what I'm curating to bring to the table. And we can use all the tools to do the work for us, and that's okay. It doesn't mean we charge for like the time that was spent. We charge for the outcome or the output that we're able to create.
Right. I mean, yeah. So we're gonna get into AI in a little bit. That's interesting, and and I think I agree for sure when you're talking about animation. AI is not really impacting that at all at the moment. It feels maybe like this iceberg on the horizon. I do imagine it probably is impacting like photography and stuff like that, where you can pretty quickly kind of replace, what a human was doing. But as far as the economy goes, like, one thing that's kind of hard to tell is, if we say, okay, there was this bubble and now it popped and now we're kind of back to where we were, let's say 2019. I remember being pretty confident that the amount of work out there, I specifically normally talk about motion design, but I think really any kind of design, product design, web design, there was way more work out there than there were artists that were good and qualified to do it. Do you still think that's the case? Do you think the supply has increased to where maybe it's a little more, there's more parity now?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know how to answer that. I'm a little disconnected from the community. But I believe there are a lot of people who are going to be able to do decent enough work. And the question isn't so much more if the supply has risen to meet demand, but whether the demand has changed in such that people want assets more quickly done and their expectations of quality are lower. So by virtue of them lowering the bar of what is acceptable, then that means that the market for who can do it widens out. And I think that's a challenge that people need to be aware of.
Yeah. Do you think that the move to every company can be remote now, do you think that impacted that? Because obviously, you can hire amazing design talent in the Philippines, for example, and pay them a lot less, because of currency arbitrage, basically. But a lot of people just weren't doing that. And then all of a sudden, now I think a lot of people are. Like, are you hearing things like that?
Yeah, I think there's, within every opportunity, there's an obstacle or challenge. And within every obstacle, there's an opportunity. So what happens is the pandemic forces everyone to, this is a reality. Everybody just has to work from home. We can't be around each other. And then things that companies said and swore they would never do, they're now doing and found out, hey, this is pretty good. It kind of works. And so we have this hybrid work environment. So that was great for people in terms of giving them flexibility, killed the commute time. All that was great. But it got employers and companies used to what's the difference between hiring someone down the street versus across the country or the world? We're okay with that. I'm not so sure that those companies are reaching out to somebody in the Philippines or India or Africa because there's the language problem, there's professionalism, and those people don't know how to get in touch with each other. That's the real challenge here. And I think you're okay. I think you're okay from that threat because I've worked with some people from overseas. It's a different management problem that I don't want to pay for. I would rather just pay for top tier talent. The good news is I don't care where you are and what you do and how you do it. I just need to get it done, and here's the money I'm ready to pay you to do it.
Yeah. What do you think about this? So I think, top tier talent, I feel like, is always going to be more or less fine. Yeah. Like talent just gets booked, right? Like, Ash Thorpe, I don't think is ever going to go hungry, right? Like guys at that level. But it does seem like maybe when things like this happen and we're sort of in this environment, it feels like maybe it makes it harder for like the new artist who just graduated or, they're looking for their first job. Do you think that's the case? And what would a new artist, like what should a new artist do, in this kind of like down design economy?
Yeah. Before I do that, let's talk about Ash Thorpe because he's our mutual friend, right? We know a little bit about him. I think Ash is okay, not because he's a top tier talent, because I know top tier talent that actually are struggling too right now. It's Ash's ability to move where the market is moving to. You notice like in the very beginning, he's a traditional graphic designer. Then he wants to be a main title designer and he's doing that. And then he winds up doing fake UI, fake UX, and that was where he was like cutting his teeth and really well known. The last thing I found out, he's designing cars for the Batman. This is like, he is very flexible and he's a true Renaissance artist. And he has all these great skill sets, an incredible eye for design and detail, and he can move wherever. Having said that, there are main title designers who are not doing well right now, who I would consider top tier talent. There's a bunch of them. It's like, why is that? Because the demand for main title design has changed a lot since the heyday. And I think that's something that's really important to think about. So as it relates to somebody who's a new graduate, it's not so much that you're good or not. You need to be good. That's the cost of entry, everybody. So if you can't be good, forget about even playing the game. That's just the cost of entry. What you have to think about is, where is there a growing or surging demand for hungry, like there's a hungry appetite for the kind of work that you do. And it's not always where you think it is. I still have friends who are trying to break into the commercial industry. And I'm thinking, what are you doing? That doesn't even exist anymore. If you talk to anybody within the advertising space, they're like, this has all changed, everybody. So you got to think about where the market's moving. Meet them there. Skate where the hockey puck is going.
Yeah, you made me think of a couple of things. So one is, I recently put out this video where I was trying to just think about what advice would I give someone right now with everything going on. And basically what I came to the conclusion of is that right now, your best bet is to be a generalist, and to be able to be flexible. And, I think the good thing for motion designers is that most motion designers are pretty flexible because you're designing, you're animating. It's a technical field. I think it's a little easier to move around. Maybe it's a little harder if you're a traditional graphic designer. I mean, do you agree with that? Do you think that Ash can do 50 things really, really well.
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of the reason. But do you think that, is it the specialists that are in trouble right now?
I don't think so. And I think there has to be an asterisk attached to the generalist concept. You have to have a core competency, and then you could broaden out that tree trunk. So the problem with a lot of people when they hear generalists is they're kind of okay at lots of things, and no one's really hiring for that. They never have, in my opinion. You wind up being like a gap filler, and that's not a job that you want. What the amazing thing about Ash is he dedicated his heart, soul, and body into becoming the best main title designer, literally commuting from San Diego to Malibu on a daily basis, which is bananas to me, right? That's insane, work at the very best motion design studio in the world in terms of main title design. He put in his dues and he got really good at it. That brought him into another space where they're like, we love what you do here. He sees opportunities, he expands his skill sets and becomes really good at that. What we don't look at is the timeline. He's been a working professional for over 2 decades now. And his passion is about cars and 3D rendering. And so he's doing these things that catch the attention of Matt Reeves, who hires him to design the Batmobile. So we understand that. And it's easy for us when we're young to look at like, wow, look at all these cool things they're doing, and to misread the path and how they got there. You still need a core competency, and I think that's really important. Now, to that effect, the demands for a motion design person, an animator, is probably in the space of social media. And in social media, you don't have to be like a crazy compositor to get a gig. You have to be an okay compositor. And you might need some design skills, some cell animation skills. And in that case, your generalist skill is good enough for that industry. So you have to look at industry versus skill set.
Yeah. That's really good. So the other thing you made me think of was a conversation I had with Joe Nash. I don't know if you know him, but he was the director of business strategy at Buck, and now he's a consultant, and he's really good at like getting data and looking at it and seeing where the ball is moving. And we had a conversation on this podcast, and he was telling me that a lot of brands and a lot of advertising dollars, what he's seeing is they're going to places where the bar is frankly a little bit lower, right? So if you're going to spend money on a Super Bowl ad, the quality of what you're putting up there better be the mill. It better be as good as it can be. But if you're spreading that out, doing like an influencer campaign or something, and he was saying that's where a lot of the ad dollars are going. They're going on to TikTok, and and the native look of a platform like that isn't super polished, right? So do you think that that's playing into it too? That it's like some people may be overqualified for some of the things that they need to do.
Yeah. So a lot of the advertising dollars and the brand dollars have moved away from traditional advertising and moved onto social media. It's where the conversation is happening. It makes a lot of sense. That's how we consume content today. And the days of pumping out a message and hoping you reach an audience, I think it's already gone. It's been gone for a number of years now. When you create content for social media, you have to be very careful trying not to do something that's too polished, because then it feels like this isn't authentic. It doesn't feel real. I'm not connecting to that person. If we want really great visuals, we'll watch HBO, we'll watch Apple, we'll watch Netflix. When we want real conversations and a little bit of the sloppiness in there, we'll go to social media. And I don't know about how you spend your time, Joey, but I spend more time on YouTube than I do for the paid subscriptions, because I want to see what's new, what's happening, and I want to connect to the people behind the other side of the lens. That's important to me. So your skills as a motion designer should be really to think, what is the goal that we're trying to achieve here? And use your skill sets in an appropriate way to solve something, and be aware of the intentionality behind it versus I'm going to make this look the best way that I can and actually drive viewership down and subs down. That's not what you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, that's a tough lesson to learn though, like, cause no one gets into, I think most people don't get into it to like learn about, the business end of things. And in the end, that becomes at least as important as the art side, and maybe in some cases even more important.
Yeah.
So, we're talking about this is kind of like leading us into the creator economy, which, both of our companies are part of, right? Kind of in slightly different ways. And I was thinking about how like there's this trend right now, and I don't know if it's a trend that's real or if it's just like a trend that like the media picked up on, but it seems like a lot of creators are sort of burning out and kind of like slowing down and making less content. And so, you and I have been doing this for a while, and you make a lot more content than me. I'm curious, like, just what's your take on the state of the creator economy? Because I think a lot of work is now done for that economy. How's the health of that, versus like the greater design kind of economy?
I think if I can look into my crystal ball, the trajectory of the creator economy is going up and up and up. And we need to talk about that a little bit. So I want to ask you this question before I answer your question, Joey, which is, how much money can someone make as a freelance independent animator?
If they're in a year,
Yeah.
if they're really good, they can make, like I'd say a really good artist could, in the United States, 150 easily.
Okay.
And I know plenty of artists that make more than 200K a year. And then during the boom years, during the COVID years, I knew artists making $300,000 and $400,000 freelance.
Wow. And then what's the bottom?
But that was very rare. That's super rare.
What's the bottom of that range? And then let's get the average.
The bottom, okay.
Yeah.
I would say like a brand new freelancer that's just kind of getting their feet wet. Maybe they make 50 or 60, 70 their first year.
I think so. So I just write 50K. So it can be somewhere between 50 to 150, right? So if the average person does, like I say, $100,000 a year, they're working a decent amount. They're getting booked on a regular basis. There are not too many down days, and so they can get their day rates in, right? That sounds really good. But let's say now you're a person who has the same animation skills, but you're actually on social and you have a decent following of a couple 100,000 followers. There's a strong probability that companies like Adobe or other sponsors will come out of the woodwork. And I'm just telling you the deals that I see. My deals are somewhere between, on the low end, 20K, on the high end, 120K to talk about products and services I already like and love. And the amount of work I'm putting in is about, I don't know, three days to earn that money.
Yeah.
And that's 3 days of like, well, let me send this email out and let me just write an idea. It's not like I'm on the box for 3 days, because social content is very different. So I want people to think about, you have all these skills, teach people how to do something, be a personality, a force in the industry, and have a point of view. And the kind of money you can make will far exceed even the boom years in terms of the height of what people are making. And I can see designers now doing that. They become evangelists. So it's a whole different thing. You have creativity, you have talent, you have personality, you have a point of view. Go make content that lots of people enjoy and love. And when you get to that point, people will just give you money because they want your audience. That's the creator or attention economy I'm talking about.
Yeah, I love that. There's an artist that we're friends with named Imani LaRussa. I don't know if you're familiar, but she's a motion designer that started posting almost like Peter Quinn did, like posting these sort of visual effectsy design things featuring her, and she would have her head split open and graphics come out and stuff. Really, really cool stuff. And she grew a very big social media following, and now that's what she does, essentially, is she does these brand deals. And I guess like that, I'm sure to a lot of people listening to this, that sounds amazing. What a dream.
Right.
I got to chat with Kevin Perry a little while ago, who's a really big social media following. And, he was telling me, he's like, I feel so lucky that I get to like make cool stuff. And like, this is how I pay my bills. How scalable is that though for, because there's a lot of animators out there that probably would love that. How many of them can this economy support doing that kind of thing, do you think?
I think it can support almost an unlimited amount of them. But the question is, obviously not everyone can do this. It requires a certain mix of skill set, panache, point of view, personality, those kinds of things. I'm finding more P words, but I'm out. Then they'll be able to do this, right? Like let's just say you have a horrible voice and you hate the way you look. Okay, it's going to be a little challenging now, but you can still make it work. But there's reasons why certain individuals wind up becoming like Hollywood stars or music superstars. It's not because they can sing the best or produce the best records. They have that mix of things, and then the world can create opportunity for them. Here's the thing. You have to have a really honest conversation with yourself. It's like, do I love doing this? Do I have the right skill set to mix? Am I ready to put myself out there and get out of my own box? If you are, then this can be great. And you're right. I kind of think about it. It's like the closest version of being an artist during the Renaissance that you can have in 2024, where you get to make something and patrons just give you money, patrons being large brands, just to keep doing whatever it is you're doing because they've fallen in love with what you do. And you can work wherever you want, however you want. It's like you have an ability to print your own money. It's pretty awesome.
What do you think, because I think there's like the artistic skill that you must have to create compelling stuff.
Yes.
And then there's probably, there's a lot of other skills though that don't typically fall into the world of like a motion designer. We can use that as an example. Like copywriting becomes way more important if that's what you're trying to do. And then there's the intangibles, right? You know this because and we have the same issue whenever we look for someone to teach a class. They have to have three things, and they have to be really good, right? And there's a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
They have to be good at teaching, and there's less people like that. And then they have to be good on camera. And that Venn diagram, that little part in the middle is very small. So yeah, and you've had a lot of success, being on camera and being a personality. Did it feel like it came naturally to you to do this sort of stuff? Did you have to teach yourself? Do you think this is a teachable skill?
It is a teachable skill. It does require some kind of raw talent in you that can be surfaced, because if you don't have that, there's not a lot we can do. It's like if you're the most uncoordinated person, teaching you how to play basketball, you can only improve so much, but you have to have that natural athleticism, so to speak. You have to have that sparkle inside of you that you've been repressing probably. Doing public speaking and teaching and doing all the things that you talked about, I'm 100% agreement with you. Very few people can do it at the level in which you and I are talking about. However, it was not a natural thing for me. It was the most unnatural thing to be on camera, to speak. And I had lots of pain and nightmares over this. But if you have the fortitude and the resilience to push through it, and you have some guidance along the way, a couple of really good friends to say, hey, you're a dummy, that's not working, do it this way, then you can get there. And I think it's something that we should aspire to have. In ancient Greece, one of the key things that they taught along with mathematics was rhetoric, the ability to make persuasive arguments. And somewhere over the centuries, we've lost that. And I think it's an important thing, a skill to have, to be able to communicate and be persuasive in your communication.
Yeah, I think it's a superpower, frankly. And unfortunately, it's kind of like a dying art too. I feel like, I remember teaching when the 1 year I was at Ringling, I was teaching 19-year-olds, and the writing, the average skill level of writing that those students had was pretty low compared to what I was kind of used to. Yeah. And then I heard from faculty maybe 4 or 5 years later that it just kept declining, and it's probably because of texting, and you just don't write as. I wonder what AI is going to do to this too.
Yeah.
My 13-year-old uses ChatGPT every day, to help her do stuff. If someone wanted to get good at writing, because honestly, I do think writing is it's a very underrated skill for artists to be able to be on social media, be compelling. Frankly, writing good emails to get you booked and introduce yourself. Yeah. Do you have any tips, any books or things like that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, we're becoming a less literate culture. We read less. Mm-hmm. We are not asked to speak as much. And I think it's just an efficiency of the education system that we have. It's less individualized. So some students are privileged enough to go to schools where they sit around the Dead Poets Society table and they have a discussion about what they read versus memorizing things for a test. And I think, unfortunately, if you don't have access to those programs, you're going to be one of these people who probably are just a cog in the wheel of the machine, So how do you get better at writing, and why is writing such an important skill? I didn't know this about myself, Joey. I didn't know that I liked writing. I didn't know I was good at it until I started putting myself into that position where I have to kind of start to think about the things I think about. So what happens is we have to write in order to understand what it is that we know. You have to pull this out of your brain. And there's two ways I know how to do this. Number one, you can throw yourself into the ocean and say, I'm going to learn how to swim. And the equivalent to that is go and teach something. To go to a community college and just volunteer to teach a class. They'll pay you something because they have to. And you can just teach something. And in that process, what's going to happen is students are going to try to extract knowledge from you. And you're going to have to stop and think, well, how do I make these decisions? What is it I'm looking for? And you'll slow your thought process down. You go from this kind of autonomic, instinctual way of designing versus okay, the first thing I did was look at this. And the second thing I did was that. And you're very good at this. You break down complex concepts into learnable skill sets that then chain together to create a much more complex expression. The best analogy I can think of to understand how to teach better is to think about Mr. Miyagi from The Karate Kid. Daniel LaRusso comes to learn karate. He doesn't do some fancy moves and say, well, copy that move. He just says, go paint the fence. Wax on, wax off. And he's like, this has got nothing to do with karate, man. but in fact it is. He broke down these discrete skill sets. And this movie is a gem in terms of learning about a lot of life lessons. So what you want to do is you want to break down how you do what you do in 5 major steps. 5 only, not 7, not 2. 2 is too few, 7 is too many, 5 is the magic number. So it's the 5-step process. What are the 5 big decisions you're making in order to be able to do something? From each one of those core principles, break those down into 5 steps and keep breaking it down until the step is so easy, a monkey can do it. Now you understand your own process. So that's the throw yourself in the ocean, volunteer to teach process. The other way that you can do this is you need to be around very literate people who are great at articulating thinking and be in discussions with them, because you'll start to see how they shape conversation, how they respond to questions, and you'll start to learn just by being around those types of people. Move away from the Valley Girl or the kids these days using their kind of abbreviated language, because you're not going to be able to be very articulate if you kind of hang around with them too much.
Yeah, I've heard, that good writing is actually just good thinking. I've heard like some version of what you just said, in a lot of places. I agree 100% with it. And I think you and I have both encountered Neville Medora before.
Yep.
He has a book out there, and I always get the title wrong. It's something like "This Book Will Teach You to Write Better" or something like that. That book changed my life, honestly. Like, I read that book, and I want to give people practical advice as much as I can. The art of writing an email to a potential client, that might be the most valuable skill you could learn right now, like given the state of the economy and everything. And that book was the gateway drug for me to teach me how to do those things the right way. Him and Noah Kagan, who I know you spoke to recently too. Are there any people that you follow that you feel like are really strong copywriters?
Not necessarily copywriters, because here's the interesting thing about Neville Medora. He's a copywriter in a different kind of copywriter than the ones that some people might be thinking about. He does direct to market or direct to consumer style copywriting, which is different than advertising copywriting, which are the people who write the just do it campaigns, that are just brilliant people who understand the language and the culture and write inspirational. They could be poets, right? They're the modern day poets. Medora is teaching something different. It's persuasive, clear communication, which he's focused on. And I think that's a great source for you. But who I look up to are the great storytellers, because if you understand how to tell the story, the writing's going to come from that. And the best book that I can recommend right now, it's also a very simple title, How to Tell a Story. It's by the Moth Radio Group. And what you want to do is buy that in the audiobook along with the printed book version, because in the audiobook, they actually include the person who presented that story as the original audio recording, which is a brilliant thing. So you can hear the narrator, but then when they break into retelling that story, you can actually hear the person tell the story in their own voice, in their own accent. And these are brilliant stories, and they've been doing this for decades. So they champion storytelling. So I would definitely check out the Moth Radio Hour as a podcast, as the audiobook, and as the written book.
That's awesome. I'm definitely going to read that. That's amazing. So let's move into trying to give the viewers, give the listeners some really tactical advice. So, I got a message, I think it was actually yesterday, from someone I'm close with, and they were asking what I brought up at the beginning of this, how bad is it out there right now? You get on LinkedIn and there's a lot of artists with amazing work saying, hey, I'm available. And a couple years ago they weren't. So it's 2024. Let's say you're a freelance motion designer and it's been slow, which is a lot of people. What would you do, right? I know there's a lot of things you could do, but I always like to think about what's the domino that you could tip over that would make all the other ones easier to push over. What strategy would you follow?
Okay.
Before Chris answers that, I want to tell you about my favorite new animation tool that I've been using lately, Rive. Rive is a very full-featured animation app, but the magic is in its ability to be an incredible interaction design tool. You can create high-fidelity animations and then layer and trigger them in very clever ways using Rive's state machines. And once you get the hang of this tool, you'll be able to create mind-blowing interactions for the web, for mobile apps, even for game engines like Unreal. Companies like Duolingo, Figma, Google, and even Adobe are using it in their products and websites. It's a revolutionary app. I'm all in on Rive. In fact, I'm an advisor to the company, and I think animators should be checking it out. You can use the app for free while you're learning it, and it could open up some new client opportunities for you. Find the link in the description and go play around with Rive. All right, back to Chris.
This is right up my alley here, so I'm going to give you the blueprint. I'm going to freestyle this because I've done this enough times. Hopefully we can do this, okay?
It's not your first rodeo,
Yeah. The first thing you need to do is make yourself easy to find. You know, to be found, you must be findable. That's an Austin Kleon quote there. And so we're doing a lot, I think, to prevent ourselves from being discovered. Let's just start with the fundamentals. If I go to your website, first of all, how did I find your website to begin with? If I didn't have to type in your name or your studio's name, how the heck did I find you? So the exercise to give a lot of people is, what are the 3 keywords someone must type into Google to find you? And it can't have your name or your studio. So now you know you have a problem because you're not findable. That's a big problem. And what you want to do is make sure when you type in those 3 keywords, there are other people worthy of being considered in that same conversation. Because if you find 3 words that you show up and there's like 17 plumbers after you, that's a terrible 3-word combination because the people are really looking for plumbers and not you. So ideally, you punch up a weight class or 2, meaning the heroes that you look up to, the people that you aspire to become like, they should be on that page. And your goal is to be in the top 10 search result. I have good news for you. Within about 2 months' time of you doing some diligent work with SEO optimization, understanding what your 3 keywords are, you will rank in the top 10. It's happened time and time again. The reason why is the people in the top 10 didn't even do anything to earn it. They're just there, right? So they're like SEO squatting, if you will. If you do something that's new and that's relevant. So let's say, what 3 keywords might somebody in the animation or design space use? Joey, help me out, and then we'll carry the...
Sure. Well, okay. So if I'm a freelancer in Boston, where I used to live, I would say Boston After Effects artist or Boston motion designer, maybe.
Perfect. Let's just go with the first one. It's easy. I just wrote it down. Okay.
Cool.
So Boston After Effects artist. Okay. What you need to do is you need now to create content that when someone searches for that, the article or the post that you wrote has tons of keywords in it that make this a valuable thing to do. So you could say, and this is a kind of a hack, and hopefully not everybody does it because it'll render this concept or strategy ineffective. But don't worry, because most people don't do any action, take any action anyway, so you'll be all right.
That's true.
You can write a post saying top 10 After Effects artists in motion design in Boston, and you would just list, and you would review and critique all 10, and you should probably create some kind of objective scale, like 4 or 5 things that you measure people on, and then weight them 1 to 5. So it feels like there's some science behind this. So the first thing you would do in the top 10 is like, here are the 5 things that I would consider categories worth looking at and how I ranked them. And so without further ado, here's the top 10. And guess who's on that top 10? You. You're going to have to put yourself in the top 10 somewhere. Probably not number 1. Probably not number 10, but maybe like number 6 or 7. So it feels like it's objective. You know, there's some humility here. So it's all good. So when somebody types in, you know, Boston After Effects, your thing will pop. It will pop. And it's going to take them to your site. And you need to present everybody fairly. And the more critical and insightful your analysis can be, the more useful it's going to be. Now, back in the day, Joey and I, we were kind of beholden to one site in particular, Motionographer, because they kind of did something like this. They would report on the industry and create their cream of the crop list. And so all these advertising studios would come and look to find out what's new and what's hot. In a way, you could become some micro version of that by doing something like this. And there are more strategies for you to start to rank on SEO. But think about ways that you can answer the question when somebody types in Boston After Effects artist, that your thing appears in the top 10. Hopefully, if you do this the right way, you appear multiple times in the top 10. So now you're much more findable. That's important. Now, once they're on your site, you got to make sure you're clear as to what you do. And this is a failing for most people. They call themselves some highfalutin title that no one understands, and they present an uncurated mix of work that doesn't have any homogeny to it. There's no theme, there's no rhyme, no reason, no processes. Now I'm confused. So you brought all this traffic to your site, but you haven't made it in such a way that I want to hire you at this point. So we're going to use Dan Maul's principle here. We're going to write a love letter sales page. Have you heard of this concept before?
No, I haven't. I love Dan, but I haven't heard
that.
Yeah,
Dan Maul's excellent. Yeah. So he's like, you know what? What you can do is you can duplicate the different sales pages and create specialized URL addresses for whatever industry you want to work in. So you can create one for sports apparel. You can create one for food and beverage. You can create one for end tags. You would then create 3 to 5 pieces that are carefully curated, and you would write and design it in such a way that if you wanted to send this to people in the sports apparel industry, that they would see this like, this is perfect. I love this. And who was it? It was Ayman Al-Abdullah, the former CEO of AppSumo. He said, if you are a generalist and you don't pick a lane, it's like writing a love letter and addressing to whom it may concern. Doesn't make any sense.
That's awesome.
It's pretty awesome, right? So if you really follow to the letter that Dan Maul suggests, you shouldn't even just do it sports apparel. You should say, Dear Karen, head of marketing of Nike, and then design that just for Karen. Tell him why you love Nike. He suggests even changing the layout and the graphics to suit somebody who's from Nike, and then do one for every person you want to work with. Now, I know what's happening. People are going to roll their eyes like, Chris, Joey, that's an unreasonable amount of work. Well, let me ask you what you've been doing in the last 6 months without work.
I was going to, you got free time, right?
You have this free time. Let's use this. This is what you're supposed to do with your time.
I love this, man. So this is, this is a very common strategy for like a SaaS business, right? They have 500 landing pages so that whatever search term you use to find them, when you land on the page, that search term is in the title somewhere. I've honestly never heard of using that as a freelancer. And it's actually, I don't think it's that much work. I mean, if you're on Squarespace or Wix or one of these platforms, it's not hard to clone your portfolio page.
Super easy.
And just, and it just becomes a landing page, meaning it's not, you can't really find it in like the menu on your site. You're intended to land there by Google. That's really great. Okay, so step 1, be easily findable.
Yep.
How does social media play into that for you?
Okay, social media is the way that you drive traffic to the site. Okay. Now you can't just say, hey, check me out. I need work. Check this out. First of all, it sounds desperate. It's just not a good look on you. And I'll tell you why. When you go to a new town and you're walking through the main thoroughfare and you're looking for a place to eat, what do we all look for? We look for the place that's got the most people and there's a line out the door. When there's no one in the shop and there's a desperate shopkeeper in front of the window, you're like, I'm not going in there. He's going to sell me on something. I don't want to go in there at all. So you're out there on social media street. It's like, hey, I have no customers. No one likes what I have. No one pays me anything. So that's a bad strategy. It's a bad look. It's poor positioning. What you want to do is think about a lesson that you want to teach people, something you've learned in your semi-long, illustrious career. And I say that with a smirk on my face, okay?
Right.
So whatever lesson you've learned, write about that. You can use examples from your real life, from projects that you've done to teach that lesson. You can say the reason why most animations suck is because of these 5 reasons, and then just write those things down. And here's an example, number 1, number 2, number 3. So what happens now is people are starting to look at you like you're an authority. You've risen above the rest of the people who just show their work day in and day out. So like I have a perspective. I'm not just a doer, I'm a thinker, and I'm thinking about these kinds of things. Or you can say, if you're going to spend all this money to do this, you might as well be burning it and throwing it out the window. And you can use your animation skills actually here, where you create a funny like animated meme thing, where money's like flying out the window, like on an infinite loop, like a cinematograph.
Yeah.
That could be cool. And then you just write about that. So you need to use your art and craft to create a specific business, marketing, or communication outcome that's relevant to people who are like, you know what, we need this. Why haven't we thought about this before?
Yeah. I mean, this is great. I mean, I think it's stuff that probably most people know on some level, like, yeah, I should be doing this. And then they don't because it's work, right? And I think too, sometimes it's hard to imagine, like when you make a post and you put it on LinkedIn, it's hard for me at least sometimes to imagine there's a real person reading it. It's not just like this vague, formless blob called the audience. There's like people reading it, and some of those people may actually want to hire you. Yeah, so what, I guess like if we were getting granular, like, LinkedIn seems to be a really great platform for this type of thing right now. it was funny. We just, I saw a report, it was probably a month ago from one of our marketing contractors saying that LinkedIn is referring the most traffic to School Motion right now out of all of the platforms we're on, which is wild. So how often do you need to be posting? Is it like every day? Does this need to become your job? Or is it like once a week? Should you schedule these things? What do you recommend?
Okay. A good, healthy company spends 10 to 20% of their resources marketing. If you're a company of one, you need to think 10 to 20% of your resources should be spent towards marketing. This is how you create a full pipeline, allowing you to be more choosy in terms of who's a good fit for you. It gives you preference, selection, and hopefully with greater demand and supply, meaning more people want you to do what you do and there's only one of you to do it, your prices can go up because that's what the market's willing to bear, right? You can easily say, look, how am I going to pick my next client? Well, there's 10 of them that want to work with me. I could do it arbitrarily. I could just say, if you pay me $800 a day or $2,000 a day, I'll do this project for you. Fantastic. Whoever wants it the most will pay. And you're like, okay, a good thing has happened for me. LinkedIn is a great place for you right now because there's so little competition and almost everybody on LinkedIn is of a business mindset. They're either looking to be hired or they're looking for talent right now. This is what's happening on LinkedIn as opposed to other places. You have to look at the intention of why somebody's on a social platform. If I'm on Instagram, I might want to look at art, be inspired, goof off, waste some time, but I don't have a high focus, right? I'm not really focused on trying to learn something. I'm not going to do a tutorial right then and there. And so you have to kind of think about the intentionality behind why someone's there. So on LinkedIn, you can post, I think, as often as you want, but I would do it at a cadence in which it doesn't feel like it's torture for you. This is kind of important because it needs to become a long-term habit for you. I see people do this all the time, Joey. They hear something like this, like, that's it, 3 posts a day. And then they do this for 2.5 weeks and they're completely burnt out and they have no more gas in the tank and they haven't gotten the results they wanted because they use all the energy up front. I think a good cadence for someone who's not sure is, I would say, 2 times a week and space it out a little bit. And here's what I want you to do. Don't get into content factory mode where you're just pumping out content after content and you're not paying attention to what's going on. Try something. Does it work? Doesn't work? Form a hypothesis. Try something else. And try a bunch of different things until you start to feel like, oh, this is what people want from me and this is what I enjoy doing. And then you go into refinement mode once you discover that one thing. Okay, so now I'm going to make a 10% tweak and see how it goes. And that's what you want to be able to do because it needs to be long-term sustainable for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And in order to do these things, everyone listening, like LinkedIn is great because you can, there's like an analytics button you can click and it'll show you like every post you've made, how it performed. And you learn pretty quickly. We're actually doing experiments right now with my other company, Rolo, where we have 3 buckets of posts and we're seeing which ones actually drive the most traffic. And then you can get really sophisticated with this. If you're using Squarespace to host your site, they have analytics built right in that can tell you how many visitors and where they're from and all this kind of stuff. So that's really cool. I want to ask you, Chris, because you've interviewed some really big names in the world of business influencers in the last few years. Seth Godin, Gary Vee, Layla Hormozi, huge fan of Layla Hormozi, and Noah Kagan and many, many others. And I'm curious, obviously you have a lot of reasons that you're bringing them on and interviewing them, but like I assume part of it is selfishly you want to learn from them because they're all very, very successful. So I'm curious what you've learned from them that you apply now to the future or to what you're doing.
Each person, whether they're famous, whether they're super successful or not, has lessons that they've learned in their life. And you have to constantly be asking yourself, how much of this can I apply? And that's how I approach it. It doesn't matter if they're struggling, if they're far behind me or far ahead of me. It's always, what can I apply in what I'm doing? This applies to books too, or when you watch a movie. Keep asking yourself, what can I apply to my life? And when you find those things, make sure you document that and start to implement it into what you do. These can be unpaid mentors that are just invaluable that you get to have access to for free on a podcast. So Eamon made me think about a lot of different things because Eamon coaches CEOs. So I'd ask him like, hey, so how do you do this? How do you do this? And he was just dropping different things. And he said something that is kind of bothered me because it's true and I don't want to do it. That's why it bothers me. He's like, you could be so much more successful. You could be a $10 million company tomorrow if you wanted to be, Chris, but you had to do something different. I'm like, shoot, what do I have to do differently? Because I'd like that result. He goes, one product, one funnel, one message, one offer. I'm like, oh my God.
I know. Yeah.
Right? So I know that's the answer. I'm fighting it for a little bit longer. But this year, you and I talked about this in the green room. We had a really bad year last year. We're like down $1 million. Don't worry, everybody. We're still okay, but it's not a good place to be. We're moving in the wrong direction. So this year, the theme is all about less but better. So we're not going to try to promote 55 products. We're going to focus on 3. And we're going to start to reduce down the things that aren't contributing to our overall goal so that we can master the fundamentals and make sure we're creating systems and processes that work for us. And then when those are like humming along, can we start adding the things that we've given up? And I think that's an important thing to do. So we want to reduce the things that we're doing down to focus and do it in an excellent way. There's a different way of saying this. Hormozi writes about this in his book, $100 Million Leads. He said like, let's like all your clients have fired you. You have no more clients. You can only pick one client to work with in the future, where all new leads will come from this one client. Who is that client? What are you doing for them? And how good does your service have to be such that all new clients will come from referrals from this first client? It's a great thought experiment. And it's one that I teach in my workshops to say, everybody, I want you to think about this. And all of a sudden, we ask them, are you working with that client today? And more often than not, the answer is no. Because we're so caught up in doing work for people that we don't sit down and actually think, what is it I really want to do with my life? And how do I do such a good job that they refer me to 2 or 3 new people? And those people refer me to 2 or 3 new people. So the constraint on this is one client. All new business comes from this client only through referral. What do you have to do? And think about it like that. And it might help you to reinvent your business and your life.
Man, that's really good. Ugh, I love that. Okay. Well, let's, because I know we're, God, this conversation's flying by, man. Oh my God. I could talk to you like all day long. I want to ask you about AI because that's the other thing that I get asked about all the time. And I don't know, maybe I'll just leave it open-ended. Like, what's your current take on it? I guess specifically in terms of most people that ask me about it are asking, I think, from a place of fear. Is this something that's going to take my livelihood away? And the other thing I hear a lot is anger, but let's start with fear.
Yeah.
Should we be afraid of this AI revolution that's happening as artists?
I think you should be concerned. My wife was telling me about this book that she had read or she listened to. It's called My Conversation with God. My wife is exploring a lot of like quantum mechanics, quantum entanglement theories, and different planes. So she's bringing crazy stuff to me.
Oh, we'd probably get along then. That's great.
Yeah, you probably get along with her. I'm like, what are you doing talking about, babe? So she says in this book, My Conversation with God, she told me there's only 2 real emotions, fear and love. That's it. Everything is derived from fear or love. So like when you want to kill somebody, it's because you're afraid of some other result. You're afraid of losing somebody, whatever it is. So, okay, are we afraid of AI? How about we reframe that? It's like, how do we love the world that's created in the wake of AI? And then we can focus our energies on doing something different. When we're running facilitation workshops and doing strategy work, we always take the problem and we reframe it as a question. So the question was 3 letters you need to write down. HMW. How might we? So you reframe the problem as, should I be afraid of AI? How's AI going to be a threat to me? How might we? And then use the problem and you reframe it as a question so that you can open up your mind. So the question might be, I'm just freestyling this here, could be bad. How might we transform our lives such that we're working fewer hours, doing higher quality work, and living a higher quality life while using emerging tools like AI? If we start there, our conversation, our emotional state, and then opportunities might look very different than responding from a state of fear. So I'm going to choose love because you know what? We can put our heads in the ground. We can start to bunker down and prepare our doomsday shelter. Or we can say like, how do we live in this world? Like if we know the apocalypse is happening, right? The zombie thing is going to be real. We're not going to sit there and just worry about it. I'm going to start preparing. What do I need to do?
Right.
Food supply, some armor maybe, a couple of swords. That's what I would be doing. So AI is going to be probably the most transformative thing that's going to happen to humanity, like since humanity began. And I think sitting by on the sidelines, it's going to be a tough place to watch the game from. It's happening. So get on the field.
Yeah. So, the current state as of this recording, and it changes, every week.
Yeah.
At this point, there's some new thing. But like, I don't know, it's probably a couple of weeks ago, maybe Sora was announced, the new OpenAI text to video model, which it completely floored me. And it was funny because I think about a week before that, I put a post on X where I was saying, I actually don't think we need to be worried about these video generation models. I just don't think they're ever going to get high fidelity enough and not have all these weird errors and be art directable to the level that you need to do professional work. And then Sora dropped and I was like, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was wrong about that.
You're like foot, meat, mouth.
Yeah, I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
So, but how do you feel about that stuff? I mean, do you think I think there's some obvious use cases when it's like, I need a social media post and I can get on Midjourney and make something beautiful and put type on it way faster than the old way, right?
Yeah.
But for like an animator, a visual effects artist, like, do you think, and I'm just asking you to speculate, I guess, like that the entire process could be done by AI? Is that a likely future?
No, I mean, yes, I believe so. And here's what, I'm forgetting his name. He's a Japanese gentleman with shocking white hair. He's a astrophysicist and he's a futurist. And he's often...
Michie Kaku or something like that?
Something like that. We butchered it. Let's show notes, correct that saying,
Exactly, yeah, please.
Yeah. So
AI will fix what I said.
Yes. His whole thing is, as a futurist, I try to imagine like the craziest thing. And then I ask myself, don't be limited by your human thinking. What is even bigger than that? And so he keeps going into the future. So I think us sitting around saying, well, it'll never be like this, we're wrong. Because whatever we think it can't do, it will do, and it'll do it faster than we think. I mean, it's not even 2 years where we're like creating memes about like 6 fingers on hands. And now they have people walking in the snow in the style that you want, totally just from nothing, like a mammoth plowing through the Arctic. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Okay, here's what we need to do. Let's take it small steps at a time. One is, what can you do with the existing AI tools that can be used to aid you in what you're doing today? What we don't realize is we're already using AI right now. And we're not complaining because we can see the application, because the software makers have made it so easy for us to use it. We don't even think about it. I'll give you an example right now. Okay. Let's say you're working on a movie or a TV show and you have to do a lot of compositing and animated elements. Okay. The first thing you got to do is you got to rotoscope things out. Well, these new intelligent roto brushes are doing AI-based training things so that it's easier for you to cut things out. Well, next thing you know, it's like, okay, well, it actually cut out an arm and that was framed out of shot. Well, AI generative fill will put that part in for you. Right now it's static, but soon it'll be moving. If you want to do a set extension, well, you don't have to paint it yourself. You have a little piece. You can use Midjourney to generate a piece of concept art for you, and then take that and import that. You can use AI to turn that into a 3D model now. So now if you want to move the camera around, you can do that. So you can do a photo projection map on it for photogrammetry. So we can use all these tools and they exist today and they can aid us in what we're doing. Why wouldn't we do that? Do we love manual labor so much? So let's jump to the future now. I believe it's a dream of most people working in the entertainment industry to be able to be the director of a feature film or an animated film someday. That seems really implausible up until about 2 years ago. Because right now you can say, I wonder what it would be like if we were to write this script or this idea. I don't remember who I was talking to. Maybe it was Eamon. I can't remember. But somebody was telling me that GPT was really powerful before they put all these constraints on it. And he gave it this prompt to write a movie screenplay or a script based on the origins of Santa Claus. Starting out as a Russian person being a bad guy. And goes through some crazy transformative moment that decides he's going to be a force for good. And it writes this beautiful script and he's reading it like, this is amazing. GPT doesn't do that these days. It probably will again soon. But okay, so now you have a script and then you can take scripts to turn your screenplay into Midjourney prompts and generate concept art. And it's only getting better by the minute. And you're like, okay, that's good. I'll select the ones that work. And then I'll use a program to cut an animatic. I'll use an AI voice to do narration. And now you have a proof of concept that you can then take and shop somewhere. But you don't have to stop there. Soon you'll be able to take this whole thing from beginning to end and create something beautiful that then you can sell or just say like, hey, this is the expression of my thinking, my creativity, all on a dime, all mostly done by yourself. I think that's a wonderful future to think about.
Yeah, I mean, so you remember our old marketing director, Caleb Ward?
Yes, I do.
We came in and visited, right? So he's got a new company now, him and his wife run, called Curious Refuge. And they teach people how to use AI to make short films. That's like their business model. They're doing really, really well. So I guess like in that world where, and my 13-year-old daughter took their class and she was, she learned how to use 11 Labs to do AI voices and stuff like that. I mean, she loves it.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. In that future where, 2 years ago, to make something like that would require an insane amount of know-how and talent and time. And now it requires less of that. What becomes important in the world of like, I need a job, I need clients, I need to get paid to do something, I need to be valuable? What do you think becomes important in that world if it's no longer, oh, I'm really good at, painting and creating these images? You can kind of get away with like not being good at that now,
Yeah, okay. And I think that's where the fear and the threat comes from, or the craft of what you do is being threatened because tools can do this better, faster, and cheaper than you, for sure. So there's this thing is don't get good at doing what a machine can do better and faster and cheaper than you. This is the problem. And I think we need to shift our thinking away from this kind of human pattern of thinking in terms of like, I need a job, a job. How about I create a future for myself where people are happy to give me money? What is it that I need to do to be able to do that? Arguably, maybe, Disney has the greatest IP on planet Earth.
Sure.
They have all the Disney characters, which allowed them to buy other IP. They bought Marvel, so they have the entire Marvel universe, with the exception. And then they bought
Star Wars.
They bought Star Wars, so the entire Lucas library. And then they bought 20th Century Fox, so now they have the entirety of the 20th Century Fox characters, including the X-Men, so they're all bringing them back.
Simpsons, everything, yeah.
Everything. They own everything.
Yeah.
My God. So they're letting you know where the future is. It's in IP. It's not in, the cell animator who made those things is getting not even 1% of 1% of what they're making. So we have this amazing opportunity in front of us, everybody. And what I try to tell people is when I was a young person, I would lay in bed, in the 80s and the 90s and dream about a future when I could think something and it would materialize. That was a future I was like looking forward to. Never did I think it was ever going to happen. This is the stuff of science fiction. And here we are complaining that this is happening in our lifetime when you're still a young person, each and every one of you. It's shocking, isn't it? Like, didn't you ever dream of like a robot that could take out your trash and do your chores and actually just absorb information into your brain so you don't have to read? That exists.
Of course, yeah.
And what are we doing? We're complaining about it.
So, I agree with all of that too. And, we use AI at School of Motion for like, to help. Essentially, like the main way we use it now is for creating assets where normally we would go find a stock photo or something like that, right?
Yep.
And it's been basically, for us, and this is the kind of way I look at it, it's allowed us to do things that would have been impossible because of budget or time before. And now we can have this like custom thumbnail. Now it always requires a lot of work. But then the key seems to be you still have to have a good idea. AI can't make, now you can ask AI for ideas and it will give them to you. I find that often they're either just kind of generic, ChatGPT has been kind of watered down, it seems a little bit lately, or they're just not specific enough to what it is you're doing. And there's not really a way in principle that the AI could know all the things you know. And so, do you think that like conceptual thinking becomes more important? Your ability to take a cool idea and pair that with a business problem for someone, and then the execution becomes commoditized. But do you think that that's kind of what it's looking like? Yeah,
100%. I think it's when we say ideas, there's lots of ways to unpack what that means. But the person, and I wrote some things down here. The creator of the future who's going to be in demand, that's not going to have to worry about anything in terms of like this downward pressure to charge less and do more, which is, first of all, you have to have a historical reference. This is very important. You need to know about art history, architecture, photography, those kinds of things so that you can reference those things in your conversation with the machine to do it for you. This was still a necessary skill from human to human. Because I remember back when I was running teams, I'm like, do you know the work of Neville Brody? I'm thinking Neville Brody meets this other person. Like, huh? And I'm like, do you kids
Right.
ever read anything? Do you know the pioneers who've started this thing for you so that you have an opportunity, right? I was a little bit of a D-bag on that. Okay, I get you. The next part is you need to be an editor curator because the machine can make something to the untrained eye. It's like, is this better or is this worse? Well, you and I know that the lighting is good. There's good foreground, midground, background. There's good depth of field. The lens is where it needs to be, or the camera's where it needs to be. Those things are good. Okay. The next thing is style and taste. So it's like, can you inject something new and different? And I like to cite Virgil Abloh here, right? Virgil Abloh is an architect turned fashion designer turned person who pretty much kind of brought in urban streetwear into the high fashion world. And to the street people, like, that was pretty obvious. But the high-end fashion houses could not see this. So he was able to bring things together in new and unique combinations that made the fine art world, the fashion world pay attention. And that was awesome. I think he's this kind of singular talent because he had taste and style. The last thing that you need is an ability to say, okay, AI got us 98% of the way there, but it's not that 2% is missing, and I want to refine it. So this is where all of your skills come into play. Like you tweak the lighting, you change the composite, you move the camera in slightly different ways. And that's what you need to do because AI at this point won't get you 100% of the way there. It's getting closer and closer. But until then, there's still a need for refinement that skilled craftspeople need to still be involved in. And that could be you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was basically the point I made prior to Sora coming out, was that even if it can get you 95, 98% of the way there, for some things that's good enough, and for some things that will never be good enough. It always has to be right, and it may always require. And for sure, I think taste is to me, taste seems like the secret sauce that you need to develop in this AI world. Well, so we're almost out of time, Chris. The last thing I wanted to ask you about on this topic of AI, and this is the other emotion. Well, I guess it's really the same, right? Fear, it's fear and love. Okay, so this would be fear, but it comes across as anger. And that's about the ethics of how these things were built. Training data coming from, ArtStation and stock photo websites where the photographers weren't notified that this was happening. How do you feel about all that? It's obviously a complicated question, but I'm just curious, like, what your gut tells you.
This is probably going to be the most controversial thing that I'm about to say. Okay,
you're used to that, though.
I am. But I'm going to say because I don't even care. I'm going to just put it out there. I think what we do is we accuse machines and software of doing things that we do, but we're okay because we're human. So we give ourselves a pass. How often have you had somebody young working with you? It's like, hey, I'm going to do some research. What they're doing is they're going to stare at something and do a very poor copy of it. Or they'll say, I was influenced by it. I'm like, no, you weren't. Influenced? No, you're doing some kind of ripoff of this. And we were okay with that for decades until AI got here. And all of a sudden we're like, now? And I was talking to the chair of the product design department at School of Visual Arts, and he said, you know what? As an educator, as a designer, we have to be very careful about understanding ethics. He said, I did my deep dive, 6 to 9 months of research and reading and attending panels and discussions. He goes, I'm good with AI. It's doing some form of deep looking. And it's nothing different than what artists have been doing for centuries. And why we're getting kind of all messed up, it's going to put it at a great disadvantage, okay? Now, there's two things from what I understand, how AI actually looks at images and understands things. And when we understand that, I think we have a different perspective. It's doing it in a way that's like reverse engineering, okay? Now, you know that Intel has the copyright to their chips, but AMD is able to somehow emulate it without breaking patent laws. And way back in the day, what they would do is they would have two separate groups of people. One group of people would observe the chip and what it would do, and they would describe it. And then someone who has no access to the chip would then be able to say, okay, based on that description, what do we need to do? So they can get around the patent infringement that was going to happen. And it was tested through courts. So you can reverse engineer something by having a clean observation, like there's one layer in between the thing and what it is that you're doing. The way I understand how AI works is it blurs images and kind of like there's a mirage, and then it tries to figure out what the heck it is. It's not looking pixel per pixel. So there's an observer, and then there is like a judge who looks at it and is like, that's good or bad. And it just keeps repeating this process. And so there's this clean reverse engineering thing that it can do. I think that is way more ethical than what you and I do as humans looking at a piece of work. Like when I see a cool element in a motion graphics piece, I'm like, I'm going to use that same freaking element.
I'm doing the same damn thing.
I just move it over to the corner a little bit, or I'll mask it with more filters on top so someone won't directly know, right? And that's what we've been doing, and we're okay with that. We actually give people awards when they steal really well. We really do. And I think a lot of our anger is misdirected. It's because we don't have a deep enough history with art that we know where things come from. We'll see something that's cool done by Brand New School, and we're like, that's so fresh. Well, it's like, you know what? Look at Schoolhouse Rocks, and you'll see what they've been doing. Look at PBS Animations. You see they're heavily inspired by Herb Lubalin. So it's like, you see what I'm saying here? Mm-hmm. So nobody's hands are clean. They're really not. We're creatures of influence, and what we do is we stand on the shoulders of giants. Let's use the tools for what they are. It'll be okay, guys.
I really want to thank Chris for coming back on. He's in high demand, so it's an honor and a privilege to be able to call him a friend and someone I look up to. I hope you got a ton of value from this conversation, and if you did, maybe you'd do me a solid and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Maybe click the like button. Anyway, thank you so much for watching or listening. We've got a ton of amazing guests lined up. I cannot wait to bring those conversations to you. Until next time.